As a seasoned horror movie enthusiast, after watching 10,000 horror films, I was finally scared by this movie. It effectively combines the filming techniques of a mockumentary and introduces a fusion of Indonesian cults and zombies, achieving a balance of both bloody and terrifying scenes. Many people experienced severe psychological discomfort after watching it. The film I'm referring to is V/H/S/2, released in 2013. It's a must-watch for thrill seekers. The story begins with two private detectives who receive a commission to find a missing boy on behalf of his mother. Upon receiving the call, they immediately drive to the boy's residence. Since the door is locked from the inside, they have no choice but to pry open a window and climb inside. However, when they reach the living room, they discover it filled with open televisions and some videotapes. They also find a dried drop of blood on the wall. Larry doesn't think much of it and starts searching the room for clues to find the boy. Aisha stays in the living room to review the contents of the videotapes. However, both of them fail to notice the terrifying presence lurking in the dark corners. Soon, the television starts playing the footage from the videotapes, which tells a horrifying story set in Indonesia. The photography team specializes in capturing supernatural phenomena. They are currently conducting an interview with a mysterious religious group called Heaven. The founder of the religion, Father, firmly believes that there is another parallel world within our own, which he refers to as heaven. He and all his followers are gradually opening the gates to this other world. In order to gather more information, the photography team wants to enter the inner workings of the religion to continue the interview. Initially, Father refused, stating that only believers are eligible to enter. However, when he glanced at Sam, he immediately changed his mind and agreed. The church is located in a remote suburb, and the group quickly drove to their destination. Two female believers, responsible for reception, had been waiting for a long time. Before entering the church, one of the young female believers placed a necklace woven from straw around Sam's neck. Its strange shape matched the ones hanging on the wall. Sam felt a bit strange, so she immediately took it off and threw it to Kyle. Kyle casually tossed it to photographer Jake, who kicked it away in disgust. Upon entering the interior of the church, they discovered that, in addition to many believers, there were also children attending classes. Although different from their expectations, it seemed relatively normal. However, at this moment, the group had no idea that they had entered a place more terrifying than hell. Once they reached Father's office, the interview with several individuals officially began, but as Jake was adjusting Father's microphone, he discovered it was stained with blood. Jake quickly informed Malik about this, but Malik, eager to conduct the interview, didn't pay much attention. Unexpectedly, just as Malik was about to ask the first question, Sam suddenly felt nauseous behind him and rushed to the bathroom immediately. Concerned about the well-being of Malik's girlfriend, Kyle followed. While on their way to the bathroom, Sam passed by the classroom once again. Noticing the teacher's absence, she saw the children still engrossed in their studies. Curious, Sam walked into the classroom, intending to interview the children. Strangely, the children were engrossed in drawing and seemed oblivious to Sam's presence. The classroom was eerily quiet, and just as Sam was about to approach them to examine their artwork, the two female believers from earlier suddenly entered the room. Sam quickly apologized for intruding. However, the two women said something strange.
Maksudnya? Tidak secantik milikmu, suatu yang sangat istimewa.
Sam was left confused and even a bit frightened. Thankfully, Kyle arrived just in time, allowing Sam to seize the opportunity and leave the classroom. Meanwhile, during Malik's interview, Jake abruptly interrupted. It turned out that the camera had run out of battery. Upon hearing this, Malik rushed to the car to retrieve the batteries, only to discover something unexpected. He unexpectedly discovered that he had been cheated. The portable camera that Kyle carried happened to transmit Sam's footage and the conversation between the two women to a device in the car. It revealed that Sam was feeling nauseous because she was pregnant, but the child was not Malik's. Realizing the situation, Sam decided to confess to Malik. Helpless, Kyle had no choice but to agree with Sam's decision and left the scene. Upon hearing their conversation, Malik's anger flared up. He couldn't believe he had been made a fool of. However, before he could explode, he heard Father's voice over the radio. Father said something strange into the microphone, and when Jake tried to intervene, Father threatened him with a knife. Inside the classroom, the two female believers were distributing unidentified liquid to the children, urging them to drink it quickly. Meanwhile, in the hallway, Kyle heard some noises coming from a nearby room. Curiosity got the better of him, and he opened the door, only to find the curtains covered in blood. Peeling back the curtains, he was met with a horrifying sight: a person lying on a hospital bed. Fear gripped Kyle as he couldn't resist uncovering the white cloth, only to discover it was a lifeless body. He unexpectedly discovered that the lifeless body came back to life, and Kyle, terrified, hastily left the scene without looking back. However, as he passed by the classroom, he witnessed an incredibly horrifying scene. The children who had consumed the unidentified liquid were all lying unconscious in the classroom. In the office, Father, after finishing the broadcast, suddenly took off his shirt and went mad, grabbing a small knife and lunging at Jake, brutally ending his life on the spot. Even Sam, who was preparing to return to the office, was kidnapped halfway by a group of female believers. Malik, who saw everything through the device, felt a sense of impending danger and hurriedly returned to the church. However, as soon as he entered the interior of the church, he witnessed a horrifying sight. A group of men stood motionless, as if controlled by some mysterious force, and started shooting at him. One man attempted to escape but was instantly shot dead by the approaching believers. Seeing the gun aimed at him, Malik quickly ducked, picked up a trash can from the ground, and threw it, seizing the opportunity to grab the gun and retaliate. Seeing the lifeless bodies strewn across the ground, Malik was left in shock and disbelief. Before he could catch his breath, several believers appeared and subdued him on the spot. Meanwhile, Kyle, who was trying to escape, suddenly heard gunshots. As he followed the sound, he witnessed believers pointing their guns at Malik. Kyle intended to intervene. In the next second, the believer pulled the trigger and killed Malik. And then the same believer proceeded to shoot and kill himself, witnessing his best friend's tragic death right before his eyes. Kyle was overcome with grief and despair. Suddenly, Sam's screams reached Kyle's ears. Without time to grieve, Kyle quickly followed the sound and ran towards it. He saw Father leading the group of crazed female believers, carrying Sam towards a room at the end of the corridor. Crouching at the corner, Kyle pondered for a moment before deciding to muster up his courage and go in to rescue her. He grabbed an iron rod and resolutely made his way towards the room at the end. However, as he reached the doorway, a violent explosion erupted from inside. Faintly, Kyle saw a creature crawling away from above, and when he turned his head, he saw Father coming out of the room, covered in blood. Father, in his bloody state, told Kyle to give up on saving anyone because their ritual had just been completed. Before Kyle could react, Father suddenly exploded in the same spot. Regaining his senses, Kyle quickly rushed in with the iron rod. He saw the female believers tightly holding Sam down on the table. Kyle decisively struck one of them with the rod, then quickly kicked away the others. However, no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't free Sam from the table. It seemed like some mysterious force was binding her, and her belly was gradually growing larger. Kyle lifted her shirt in a panic and discovered a creepy symbol. Just as he panicked, Sam's belly began to writhe, as if something was about to emerge. As her belly grew larger, a tentacle suddenly burst out, and a horrifying monster crawled out from inside her. At that moment, Kyle forgot about Sam and quickly ran towards the exit. However, as he reached the corridor, he came face to face with Jake, who was already dead and had turned into a zombie. Kyle escaped into a classroom, only to discover that the children had also undergone mutations. Just as he managed to run out of the classroom, he encountered the monster that had emerged from Sam's belly. Even the male believers who had just been shot had turned into zombies and lunged at Kyle. The church at this moment was like hell, but after a struggle, Kyle managed to escape from inside. He sprinted all the way back to his car and immediately started the engine to leave the place. However, just as he had driven out for a short while, the roars of the monster came from behind, getting closer and closer. Covered in blood, Kyle woke up from the car accident, struggling to crawl out. Unexpectedly, as soon as he poked his head out, he heard a strange cry from the roof. Kyle smiled helplessly, ultimately being treated as food by his obedient son. The contents of the videotape had ended, but the horrifying story had only just begun. After searching the rooms, Larry returned to the living room and discovered that Aisha had shot herself. To figure out the reason behind it, Larry decided to play the contents of the videotape. Unexpectedly, it was a recording left behind by the missing boy, who had also ended his own life in the room. Just as Larry was feeling bewildered, he witnessed a chilling scene. The deceased boy suddenly came back to life and staggered out of the room. A few minutes later, Larry and Aisha arrived at the same room. Larry felt a chill down his spine, but to his surprise, Aisha, who had fallen to the ground, suddenly stood up and turned into a zombie, lunging at Larry. After a desperate struggle, Larry quickly hid in the bedroom's closet, only to discover that the boy who had turned into a zombie was hiding there as well. And the movie ended with Larry's death.